Ladies and gentlemen, everybody wants to be wise. Everybody wants to be the one others come to for insight, direction, clarity. But wisdom isn't something you stumble into. It doesn't fall on your lap because you aged or experienced pain. Wisdom starts with a posture, not a possession. Solomon didn't become wise by pretending to know everything. He became wise by first acknowledging he knew nothing without divine guidance. That's the real secret. The gateway to a wisdom mindset is humility, and most people miss it because they're too busy trying to appear strong instead of being still long enough to grow strong. When Solomon was handed a kingdom, a throne, power, wealth, and influence, he could have relied on all of that. But instead, he bowed his head and said, "I don't know how to go out or come in." That right there is the mindset that opens the door to extraordinary wisdom. It's the humility to say, "I don't know everything, but I'm willing to learn." That's what separates people who lead well from people who lead loud. The world is noisy with opinions, but wisdom whispers, and it only speaks to those who have silenced their ego long enough to hear. Some of the wisest people you'll ever meet are not the ones talking the most, they're the ones listening, observing, learning. That's the beginning of wisdom. It doesn't start on the mountaintop. It starts in the valley of surrender. It starts when you look at your own life, your decisions, your patterns, and say, "I need better understanding. I need insight that comes from beyond me." And if you can admit that, you're already on your way to something powerful. See, we live in a time where people are praised for being loud, aggressive, certain. But Solomon teaches us that wisdom isn't found in force. It's found in reverence. It's found in the quiet decision to admit you need help before you make a move. That mindset right there will save you from years of regret. It will protect you from making emotional decisions that feel right in the moment, but destroy your peace in the long run. You cannot carry the weight of wisdom on the shoulders of arrogance. You have to bow to rise. You have to listen before you speak. You have to acknowledge your need before you receive the insight. That's why wisdom is rare, because humility is rare. But if you dare to choose humility, you'll unlock a depth of wisdom that most never touch. The door to a wise life will only open when your pride steps aside and your spirit bows to learn. You see, wisdom doesn't just live in the mind. It flows through discipline. Discipline is the bridge between what you know and what you become. And too many people admire wisdom but resist the lifestyle that cultivates it. They want insight, but they don't want instruction. They want understanding, but they don't want to be told no. But the reality is, Solomon's wisdom wasn't just in what he asked for. It was in how he lived, how he governed, how he structured his time, his leadership, his responses. That took discipline, because wisdom without order becomes noise, and a mind without discipline becomes chaotic, no matter how much you know. You can hear truth every day of your life, but if you don't develop the discipline to apply it, it dies inside of you. It doesn't matter how gifted you are, how smart you are, how spiritual you feel. If you don't have the daily discipline to sit with truth, reflect on it, and act on it, you will be forever stuck in cycles of inspiration with no transformation. That's the danger. Inspiration feels like change, but it's not change. Change comes when you discipline yourself to do what you now know. Wisdom demands that you train your impulses. It demands that you lead your emotions instead of letting them lead you. That when you feel like reacting, you pause and respond with principle. That when you want to cut corners, you choose integrity. That when you feel the pressure to impress, you stay rooted in what's true. This is the discipline of a wise mindset. It's not glamorous, but it's necessary. Because every decision you make, every word you speak, Every move you take is either building a future you can respect or one you'll regret. And wisdom knows this. That's why it doesn't rush, it doesn't react, it doesn't perform, it aligns. People often ask, "How do I become wise?" And they expect some mystical answer, but the truth is simple. Show me your disciplines, and I'll show you your wisdom. Not the wisdom you talk about, the wisdom you live, because wisdom shows up in your habits. It shows up in what you prioritize. It shows up in what you walk away from. It shows up in what you refuse to entertain. Solomon wasn't just wise in thought. He was wise in structure. He ordered his life in a way that reflected his values, and that's the call for us today. You can't say you want peace but feed drama. You can't say you want clarity but live distracted. You can't say you want growth but avoid every discomfort. Wisdom demands discipline, not once, not occasionally, but consistently. The fruit of wisdom grows in the soil of daily discipline, and if you want your life to reflect something greater, that's where the planting begins. A wise mindset doesn't just speak. It listens. It listens deeply, intentionally, and humbly. One of the greatest signs that wisdom is growing inside you is that you no longer need to prove that you know. You stop interrupting. You stop talking over people just to sound intelligent. You realize that the greatest power in a room isn't found in the loudest voice, but in the most silent discernment. That's why Solomon didn't just rule with wisdom, he ruled with restraint. He knew how to sit in silence and draw truth out of situations others rushed past. He understood that if you slow down and really pay attention, wisdom will speak louder than ego ever could. But most people aren't listening, they're waiting to speak. They aren't trying to understand, they're trying to dominate. And when you live like that, you miss the opportunities that silence brings. You miss the lessons in people's tone. You miss the warnings hidden in conversations. You miss the subtle red flags, the divine nudges, the soft convictions. You miss the moment because you're too busy trying to impress it. But wisdom waits. Wisdom observes. Wisdom listens beyond the noise. Listening requires humility. It requires that you let go of the need to be right so that you can grow into what's right. It requires that you learn from everyone, especially those you might underestimate, because wisdom doesn't just come from kings and scholars. Sometimes it comes from children, from pain, from quiet moments when you finally stop talking and start hearing. Sometimes the wisdom you need is locked inside a moment you've been too busy to notice. But when you develop the mindset to listen deeply, life becomes your teacher, and every conversation becomes a classroom. Think about how many mistakes could have been avoided if we just listened. How many relationships could have been preserved? How many wrong turns could have been corrected? But pride makes us deaf. Arrogance blinds us to instruction. And ego convinces us that talking louder makes us more powerful. But in reality, it only reveals our insecurity. Wisdom doesn't need a spotlight. It builds influence through stillness, not sound. So if you want to walk in the mindset of wisdom, train your ears before your mouth. Train your spirit to hear what's not being said. Train your heart to receive even when it hurts your pride. Because the fool is always talking, but the wise are always tuning in to what matters, tuning in to what's needed, tuning in to what's true. The loudest person in the room is rarely the wisest, and the one who listens most often carries the deepest truth. Wisdom doesn't just respond to situations, it anticipates them. It sees beyond the surface, beyond the noise, beyond the moment. Solomon's wisdom wasn't reactionary, it was visionary. He didn't wait for things to fall apart to make a plan. He built with insight from the beginning. That's what true wisdom does. It doesn't wait until the storm hits to build a shelter. It builds in the sunshine with the storm in mind. The problem with most people is that they confuse knowledge with foresight. They gather information but fail to apply revelation. And without revelation, your foundation is weak, your vision is short-sighted, and your life becomes a reaction instead of a direction. When you operate from wisdom, you don't just look at what people say, you discern their patterns, their motives, their energy. You read the room, not just the words, and that's what made Solomon stand out. He wasn't just listening to stories. He was extracting truth. Wisdom gives you the ability to pull clarity out of confusion, direction out of disorder. It's not about always knowing the answer. It's about learning how to ask the right questions. Because when you ask right, life reveals what others miss, and those revelations become the blueprint for building something that lasts. You can't lead wisely if you're always surprised. You can't be strategic if you only see what's happening in front of you. Wisdom lifts your eyes, it opens your ears, it trains your mind to think deeper. It says, don't just look at the fruit, check the root. Don't just follow the trend, examine the foundation. Don't just chase the crowd, seek the path. When you carry wisdom, you stop being impressed by appearance and start being drawn to authenticity. And that shift alone will save you from unnecessary battles, broken alliances, and wasted time. Wisdom creates margin. It gives you the ability to pull back, to breathe, to evaluate. It teaches you how to move with patience, not panic. How to respond with principle, not pressure. How to act from purpose, not impulse. People who lack wisdom are always reacting, always chasing, always adjusting, always overcommitting. But the wise remain planted, because they understand that everything that moves isn't meant to be followed. If you want to walk in a wisdom mindset, you must be willing to slow down your pace and deepen your discernment. You must be willing to say no to good things so you can be available for the right things. Because wisdom doesn't waste time, it redeems it. And every time you move in wisdom, you realign your life with divine timing. The only way to build a life that doesn't collapse under pressure is to build it with foresight, not just hindsight. When you understand the value of wisdom, you stop speaking to be heard and start listening to understand. You begin to recognize that wisdom doesn't always raise its voice. It carries weight in silence. Solomon knew when to speak, but more importantly, he knew when not to. He mastered the art of restraint, because sometimes your silence carries more authority than your words. Wisdom teaches you that not every fight is yours, not every opinion deserves your response, and not every crowd is worth your explanation. The wise don't chase noise, they carry presence. The reason many people drain themselves emotionally and mentally is because they waste their energy proving instead of producing. They talk too much and listen too little, but wisdom doesn't announce itself. It demonstrates. It shows up in how you move, how you decide, how you wait. Solomon's power wasn't just in what he said. It was in the atmosphere his discernment created. His decisions spoke louder than debates. That's what real wisdom does. It influences without needing attention. We live in a time where people confuse activity with effectiveness. They think the louder they are, the more powerful they become. But that's not wisdom, that's insecurity in disguise. Wisdom doesn't beg to be seen, it knows its value without applause. When you start living with that kind of understanding, you realize that you don't need to be everywhere or involved in everything. You begin to edit your access, protect your peace, and move with intention. You become strategic with your presence and selective with your responses. Wisdom gives you the ability to lead without dominating, to correct without condemning, to influence without manipulation. It shows you that power isn't found in control, it's found in clarity, and the clearer your mind is, the fewer battles you engage in. Solomon wasn't swayed by public opinion, he was anchored in principle, and it's that anchoring that gave him the ability to rule with stability and build with longevity. Because you can't create something lasting if your emotions are leading your decisions. Wisdom slows you down long enough to see what others overlook. It keeps you from reacting to distractions and empowers you to respond from depth. It's not just about avoiding failure. It's about building with excellence. It's about seeing the long-term impact of short-term choices. And the more you walk in wisdom, the more you'll discover that clarity is power, and silence, when used correctly, is one of your greatest tools of strength. There is no need to speak when your fruit is loud enough. And finally, wisdom teaches you to build beyond yourself. It teaches you that life is not about how much you gather, but about how much you leave behind. Solomon's legacy wasn't just his riches or his palace. It was the wisdom he imparted that outlived him. Because when wisdom rules your life, you stop thinking only about the moment and start building for generations. You stop chasing applause and start creating impact. You begin to live with the awareness that everything you do is either laying a foundation for the future or dismantling what could have been. Most people are so focused on being impressive that they forget to be impactful. But wisdom doesn't impress, it plants. It sows seeds in silence, knowing that fruit takes time. It doesn't seek validation for every act. It serves, it builds, and it prepares the next to go further than the last. A wise person doesn't just think about their own success, they think generationally. They understand that real legacy isn't in what you keep, it's in what you give. Your mindset, your values, your disciplines, these are the true inheritance. When Solomon asked for wisdom, he wasn't asking for a shortcut to power. He was asking for the ability to sustain what he was called to lead. And that's what wisdom does. It sustains. It stabilizes what strength alone cannot carry. It gives depth to your influence and vision to your ambition. It refines your character so that your gift doesn't destroy you. Because without wisdom, success is a trap. But with it, success becomes a tool to serve others and not just self. A person with wisdom knows that every decision echoes. That every step you take is either building or breaking what you're trying to become. And you can't afford to keep building something that your character can't support. That's why wisdom is not just about knowing. It's about becoming. It molds you. It humbles you. It stretches your capacity so that you don't just grow big, you grow deep. And when your roots run deep, the storms of life can shake you, but they won't break you. You may never sit on a throne like Solomon did, but you are ruling over decisions every single day. You are stewarding relationships, opportunities, time, energy, and the way you carry your influence matters. Wisdom equips you to move in silence and let your decisions echo long after the noise is gone. That's how you build a legacy, not by shouting your way into rooms, but by being so rooted in wisdom that your fruit speaks long after you're gone. Leave behind more than memories, leave behind a blueprint of wisdom.